December 4th, 5:58 a.m. Aurora, Colorado. I opened the door to my home office and realized it was no longer my office at all. Drawers hung open like wounded ribs. My safe sat cracked, its steel jaw pried apart. Papers littered the carpet in thin, defeated piles. And on the desk, centered with deliberate calm, lay the document that hollowed me out in a single glance. Declaration of Mental Incompetence. Signed Martha Grayson. Witness, Corinne Hale. Estate transfer value, $1 million. Beneficiary, legal spouse's family. My signature copied with surgical precision, down to the slight leftward tilt of the M. Then I heard her voice, soft, smug, coming from Nate's phone, which lay face down on my chair, still on speaker. By tomorrow she'll be in the care facility. Once that happens, the $1 million transfers to us. We just need her confused until noon. My son said nothing. That silence cut deeper than any forged line on paper. In that moment, they didn't just betray me. They buried me alive inside their plan. How could they do this to me? If you want to hear the full story, make sure to subscribe. Now let me tell you how it all began. My name is Martha Grayson, and 3 things have always defined me. Numbers, steel, and quietly getting back up. I am 69 years old. For 23 of those years, I worked as a structural engineer, driving up and down Colorado with rolled blueprints in my back seat and coffee stains on my maps. I spent entire winters on half-frozen job sites, watching cranes inch beams into place while the wind tried to claw them back down. My bridges carry trucks, families, teenagers texting through yellow lights. I know exactly how much weight they can bear. No one ever warned me that the heaviest load would not be traffic or snow, but my own family. I became a widow at 58. My husband, Daniel, left suddenly. An early morning heart attack in the kitchen, the smell of burnt toast still in the air when the paramedics carried him out. He was practical, careful. Before he died, he set up a legacy trust in my name worth just over $1 million. So you are never dependent on anyone, he told me, sliding the folder across the dining table. The paper felt heavier than it looked. That trust became my quiet backbone. Not a secret, but not a topic I paraded around either. Enough to keep the house, maintain my old Subaru, pay my taxes, and hire help when my knees finally complained louder than I did. Enough to let me sleep. My son Nathan, everyone calls him Nate, is 41. As a boy, he built forts out of sofa cushions and demanded I test the structural integrity by sitting in them. He cried when we drove over the very first bridge I helped design, overwhelmed at the idea that his mother had made something so big. He grew into a gentle man. Soft-spoken, loyal to a fault, the sort of person who apologizes to furniture after bumping into it. Then he met Cora. Corinne Hale arrived in Nate's life like a polished brochure. She had sleek dark hair, a wardrobe of pressed neutrals, and nails that never seemed to chip. She worked in real estate, specializing in high-value properties and retirement transitions, as she liked to say. Her smile was perfect, but it never quite reached her eyes. When she shook my hand the first time, her fingers were cool and dry, like someone testing the temperature of a deal. First, I tried to be grateful. My son had spent years alone after a messy breakup that left him wary. Cora seemed organized, efficient, the type who would remember birthdays and dental appointments. She brought over lemon bars in a white bakery box, glancing around my living room with quiet calculation as she stepped inside. "You have such a charming place, Martha," she said, running her hand along the fireplace mantel. "So much potential." I noticed how she paused on the word. Potential. A property word. Over the months that followed, she learned small things about me. That I paid my bills on time. That I preferred paper statements to online ones out of habit. That I still kept the financial folder Daniel had prepared, neatly labeled, in the locked drawer of my desk. I never told her the exact amount in the trust, but I saw the way her eyes sharpened when Nate casually mentioned, "Mom is okay." Dad made sure of that. My kindness became a kind of currency in that house. I babysat their daughter Emma, on short notice when Cora had showings. I watered their plants when they were away. I used my savings to help with the down payment on their starter home, when an inspection revealed an old sewer line that the bank refused to ignore. I told myself it was what mothers did. Build the bridge so their children could cross safely. Cora always thanked me, always with the right words. "You're a lifesaver, Martha." We couldn't do this without you. You're like the foundation of this family. She complimented my bridge work in the same breath. She asked casual questions about my will. Did I have one? Was there an executor named? Had I thought about how complicated probate could be at our age? She dressed these questions in concern, wrapping them in phrases like, I just want to make sure you're protected. I had spent a lifetime checking stress diagrams, calculating safe loads, and reviewing failure points. Yet with her, I ignored the first hairline crack when it appeared. Because she was my son's wife. Because she called me mom in front of other people. Because I thought loyalty could protect me from greed. I was wrong. And the woman who would later sign her name as a witness to my supposed mental incompetence began very quietly by learning exactly how far my trust, and my trust fund, could stretch around her ambitions. To Nate, she was security and sophistication wrapped in a tailored coat. To me, she was a variable I hadn't finished solving for yet. I told myself to be fair, to give her time. After all, people had doubted me on every project I'd ever led, and I had proved them wrong by finishing the bridge. I ignored my own early warning signs. The first warning sign didn't come with thunder. It arrived quietly, the way structural failures often do, one hairline fracture beneath the paint, almost invisible unless you're looking directly at it. And at the time I wasn't looking. I still believed Cora's smile meant warmth instead of calculation. It happened on an ordinary Thursday evening. Nate had invited me for dinner. Roasted chicken, steamed vegetables, nothing complicated. The house smelled of rosemary and lemon. Emma played on the floor with wooden blocks, lining them up in careful rows, the way I used to line up rebar on job sites. I remember setting my purse on the entry bench deliberately, the way I always did. My keys inside. My glasses case tucked into the side pocket. A small notebook where I kept grocery lists and dates for appointments. That purse had traveled with me across half the state. Its leather carried years of road dust and sun. Dinner was nearly ready when Cora glanced toward the doorway and said lightly, Martha, did you forget your purse in the car again? She smiled, that soft, practiced smile that never pushed past her cheeks. Age can be tricky sometimes. I paused, confused. No, dear, I left it right there on the bench. She let out a small, sympathetic laugh. Oh, I didn't see it. Nate, maybe we should help her keep things in one place. It must be stressful to misplace essentials. Her tone was gentle enough to pass as concern, but her eyes flicked toward Nate first, gauging his reaction, not mine. A quiet test. I see that now. At the time I simply brushed it off. I walked to the entryway, picked up the purse exactly where I'd left it, and returned to the table. I didn't make a joke. I didn't challenge her. I told myself the comment didn't matter. But it stayed with me. Throughout dinner, small suggestions slipped into her conversation like threads she hoped no one would notice. Do you ever feel foggy in the mornings, Martha? She asked while cutting her chicken. My aunt struggled with memory issues at your age. Can sneak up on you. Nate didn't react much. He was focused on helping Emma with her vegetables, unaware of the slow foundation shift happening beneath us. His face held the same gentle patience he'd had since childhood. He didn't recognize the tone behind Cora's words. Why would he? She had spent months showing him only her curated edges, her efficiency, her competence, her calm. I remember the way the dining room light hummed above us, pulsing softly against its glass shade. I remember how the metal fork felt steady in my hand, clear, solid. Every sense told me I was fine, grounded, present. But one small comment, framed as harmless, had already begun to root itself in the air around us. When I left their house that night, I sat in my car for a moment before turning the key. The steering wheel felt cold beneath my palms. A thin layer of frost had begun to form along the windshield edges, catching the streetlight in a grainy glow. I tried to dismiss the unease. I told myself it was nothing more than a misunderstanding, a misplaced attempt at humor perhaps. After all, she had no reason to harm me. I had welcomed her, supported her, and done my best to love her for Nate's sake. Yet a feeling tugged at me, quiet but persistent, like the first tremor before a bridge shifts under unexpected weight. Weeks later, I would remember that moment with painful clarity, the warmth of the house behind me, the cold night outside, and the growing suspicion I refused to acknowledge. I had spent my entire professional life examining stress points, predicting failure and reinforcing structures before they buckled. That evening, for the first time, I realized I might have ignored one in my own home. And that was the first crack. The shift began quietly, almost politely, the way winter arrives in Colorado, one cold morning, then another, until the ground hardens beneath your feet and you realize the season changed without asking permission. Started with my keys. I kept them on a small ceramic dish beside the front door. The same dish Daniel and I had bought at a crafts fair in Estes Park 30 years earlier. The glaze was cracked in places, the blue faded to a softer shade, but it had held our keys without fail. One morning I reached for them and found the dish empty. I checked my coat pockets, the kitchen counter, even the inside of my mailbox. Nothing. When I finally located them, they were sitting on the back porch table, cold with dew. I remember staring at them, the metal catching the weak morning light. "I didn't leave you out here," I murmured to no one. The yard was silent except for the sound of a distant lawn mower starting up. A strange weight settled in my chest, not fear exactly, but a faint recognition that something wasn't aligning. The next incident happened 3 days later. I locked the front door at night, double-checked it even. It was an old habit from years of living in neighborhoods where wind could rattle a latch loose. The click of the deadbolt had always comforted me. But when I woke the next morning, the door stood open, a narrow slice of cold air drifting into the hallway. My carpet felt chilled beneath my bare feet. I checked the windows, the back door, the garage, all untouched. Nothing missing. Nothing broken. The house was too quiet, as if holding its breath. By the end of that week, the whispers began. My neighbor Linda, who had swapped recipes with me for years, lingered at the mailbox a little too long. "Everything okay, Martha?" she asked, her voice bright but her eyes searching. "Cora mentioned you've been forgetting things lately. We all get there eventually." I felt my stomach tighten. What exactly did she say? "Oh, nothing terrible," Linda replied quickly, waving her hand as if brushing off dust. "Just that you've been misplacing items. That she's worried you might be pushing yourself." Pushing myself. That was one of Cora's favorite phrases, I later realized. A way of sounding concerned while planting a seed. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea, watching the steam rise and curl. The refrigerator hummed in its usual steady rhythm. There was nothing chaotic in that room, nothing out of place. Yet a slow, deliberate unease had begun spreading through my days like a hairline crack lengthening under pressure. The following afternoon, Nate stopped by unannounced. He brought groceries, apples, bread, the brand of soup he thought I liked, though he'd chosen the wrong one. He acted as though he were visiting someone recovering from illness. His voice was softer, more careful, as if the air around me were fragile glass. "Mom, you sure you're doing okay?" he asked while setting items on the counter. "Cora said you've been a little overwhelmed. Maybe we should think about getting you some help around the house." I kept my expression steady. "I'm perfectly fine. Who told you I wasn't?" He hesitated. I saw the conflict in his eyes, the instinct to defend me tangled with the need to believe his wife. Just things she noticed. Not things I had told him. Things she had crafted. I walked to the sink, rinsed an apple, and noticed the faint tremor in my fingers, not from age, but from the quiet realization that someone had been building a narrative around me without my consent. Over the next week, the pattern escalated. A bill I always paid on time appeared overdue. A dentist appointment I had written on my calendar vanished. An email from my bank flagged unusual activity that I knew I hadn't initiated. When I mentioned any of this to Cora, she offered soft smiles and subtle warnings. "These things happen when we're tired," she'd say. "No shame in admitting help might be overdue." She said it with kindness, but the shape of her mouth never matched her eyes. Each interaction left me feeling as though she were quietly repositioning me, the way a contractor adjusts a support beam whose integrity they intend to question later. A nudge here, a suggestion there. Nothing dramatic. Nothing anyone else would necessarily notice. But I noticed. And despite the calm facade I kept, something inside me had begun bracing. An old instinct, the one that told me when a bridge was beginning to shift under unexpected load. My life still looked intact from the outside, but deep down I could feel it. The tension rising, the first subtle pull toward collapse. The morning it happened, the sky over Aurora was the color of cold metal. That pale gray that never fully brightens no matter how long you stare at it. I woke before sunrise, the house still carrying the faint scent of last night's lavender candle. My slippers waited beside the bed, exactly where I had placed them. Everything felt familiar, steady, predictable, until it wasn't. At 5:58 a.m., I opened the door to my home office. The air inside was wrong, still but wrong. A quiet that held its breath. Drawers were wrenched open, some hanging crooked on their rails. My filing cabinet leaned against the wall as if someone had shoved it too hard. Papers lay scattered across the rug, property taxes, engineering sketches from old projects, utility bills. My safe, the one I'd kept since Daniel's death, sat cracked open on the floor, its steel edge bent unnaturally. But the desk, it was the desk that told the Real story. Placed in the center of the blotter, perfectly squared to the edge, was a document. No dust, no smudge, no sign of hesitation. Someone had wanted me to see it immediately. Declaration of mental incompetence. My name typed in bold. My signature forged at the bottom, so precise it made my throat tighten. A witness line. Signed Corinne Hale. Estate transfer value, $1 million. Beneficiary, legal spouse's family. Each detail calculated. Each line a quiet theft. My first instinct was disbelief. A strange buzzing filled my ears like standing beneath power lines. I lowered myself into the office chair, its cushion colder than usual, and traced the fake signature with my finger. Whoever had done it had studied me. Every curve, every pressure point of the pen. I felt something hollow open inside me. That's when I heard it. A voice, faint but unmistakable. Cora's voice. Nate's phone lay on my chair's cushion, screen dark but still on speaker. He must have left it there accidentally. A small mercy, or perhaps the universe refusing to let lies breathe too long. By tomorrow she'll be in the care facility, Cora said. Her tone was smooth, businesslike. Once she's admitted, the million transfers to us. We just have to keep her confused until noon. I felt the world tilt, the floor shifting under invisible weight. Then Nate's voice, quiet, strained. I don't like this. She's my mother. You're overthinking it, she replied. It's already done. The papers are ready. We've built the case. Confusion, misplacing items, the neighbors noticing. Everything is lined up. One more push and she won't be able to contest anything. My hands went cold. The keys on my back porch. The open front door. The overdue bill that had vanished from my calendar. None of it had been random. None of it my imagination. She had been constructing a narrative around me, brick by brick, until the structure of my own life no longer looked stable from the outside. Nate spoke again, barely audible. I don't want her hurt. She won't be hurt, Cora said. She'll be taken care of. And you'll finally have the financial breathing room to fix your business. This is what families do, support each other. Trust me. Then she added with a softness meant to deceive. Tomorrow, Nate. Let it happen. I stared at the phone, waiting for my son to defend me, deny it, walk away from the plan entirely. But silence followed, long and heavy, settling over the room like dust after demolition. He didn't agree. But he didn't refuse. And sometimes silence is its own signature. I stood there in my office, surrounded by the debris of my own life. Drawers torn open, my safe violated, documents pulled apart, and understood with terrifying clarity that they had already dug a grave for my autonomy. They hadn't just questioned my competence, they had erased it on paper. The betrayal was not in the forged signature. It was in Nate's silence. I pressed my hand against the edge of the desk to steady myself. The wood felt familiar beneath my palm. The same surface where I had reviewed blueprints and balanced checkbooks and written birthday letters. Now it held the proof that someone I loved had been persuaded to see me as a burden, an obstacle, a means to an end. In that moment, standing in the half-light of dawn, I felt something inside me crack. Not the way a bridge breaks all at once, but the way steel groans under strain, warning anyone listening that collapse is coming. Their plan was nearly complete, but they had made one mistake. They believed I wouldn't notice the load they were placing on me. They forgot I spent my entire life calculating exactly when a structure fails. That evening, after the office and the phone and the forged lines of ink, the house felt unfamiliar, as if someone had quietly rearranged its bones. I moved through each room the way an inspector walks an old bridge, slowly, hand on the railing, listening for sounds I had ignored before. In the kitchen, the lavender candle from the night before sat on the counter. The wick bent. A thin puddle of wax hardened around it. I picked it up and carried it to my bedroom, setting it on the nightstand beside my old alarm clock. The numbers glowed a steady green. 7:42 p.m. Too early to sleep. Too late to pretend nothing had happened. I sat on the edge of my bed and finally let the silence in. It pressed at my chest, heavy and close, thick enough to feel like weight. The hum of the refrigerator in the next room sounded distant, almost underwater. For a moment, I let myself imagine the version of this night that Cora had planned for me. Confused, disoriented, already sedated in some care facility. My signature dismissed as a relic of a person I supposedly no longer was. I refused to fit into that outline. My hands were steady as I struck a match. The sulfur scent flashed sharp in the air, then softened as the candle flame caught. It flickered once, then drew upright, thin and determined. I watched it move, that small living light in a dark room, and felt something in me begin to answer it. I had built bridges through blizzards and budget cuts and political battles. I had stood in hard hats on unfinished overpasses while men twice my size questioned my calculations. Steel did not scare me. Wind did not scare me. Load did not scare me. But this, my own child's silence, my daughter-in-law's careful campaign to erase my competence, this cut deeper. The urge to call Nate rose in me like a tide. I pictured his name on my phone screen, his voice on the other end saying, "Mom, I'm sorry, I didn't know what I was agreeing to." But when I reached for my cell phone on the nightstand, my hand froze inches away. If I called him now, in shock and hurt, every word might be twisted and used as evidence. Any hint of confusion, any tremor, any misplaced phrase could be fed back into their narrative. They wanted me rattled. They needed me to sound uncertain. Instead, I let my hand fall back to my lap. Across from the bed, the closet door stood slightly ajar. I could see the edge of Daniel's old wool coat, the one he used to wear on winter site visits. The sight of it grounded me. Daniel, who had planned that trust so carefully. Daniel, who had told me, if anyone ever tries to push you around because you're alone, remember, you are not. Alone or not, I knew what came next. In engineering, when you discover a flaw in the structure, you don't panic. You document. You measure. You gather proof. Then you design the fix. On the nightstand beside the candle lay my notebook, the small spiral-bound one where I wrote grocery lists and reminders. I opened it to a fresh page and wrote the date in neat numbers, December 4th. Underneath, I listed everything I knew like data points in a report. Keys moved to back porch without my knowledge. Front door left open after being locked. Neighbors told I'm forgetful. Overdue bill that I never received. Bank alert about unusual activity. Forged declaration of incompetence. Cora's voice on speaker. Plan to transfer $1 million. Nate's silence. Seeing it on paper cooled the chaos in my head. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a pattern. A constructed case. A structure built carefully over weeks, maybe months, designed to carry one outcome, my removal. I closed my eyes and drew a slow breath through my nose, letting it out in a measured stream. Grief could wait. Anger could wait. Right now I needed clarity. I am not incompetent, I said aloud, my voice quiet but grounded. I am under attack. Naming it changed something. It shifted the weight from my shoulders to the page in front of me. This was no longer a vague horror. It was a problem to solve. I looked at the candle again, its flame holding steady in the stillness of the room. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just persistent. They won't destroy what I've built, I whispered. In that moment, I stopped being their target and became what I truly was. An engineer facing a compromised structure. My spine straightened like steel under load. I did not yet know every step I would take. I did not know how much it would cost in tears and distance and the quiet breaking of hope. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. If they wanted to declare me mentally incompetent, they were going to have to do it while I was wide awake, prepared, and holding every piece of evidence they had hoped I would never see. The candle burned on, small but unwavering. I watched it until the first plan formed clearly in my mind. I would not wait to be rescued. I would reinforce my own foundations. The next morning, I woke with a plan instead of panic. Grief was still there, lodged under my ribs like a stone, but it no longer ruled the room. The candle from the night before sat on my nightstand, the wick curled, wax cooled into a pale circle. I touched the glass. It was cold now, but I remembered the heat it held when I made my decision. I did what I have always done when a structure shows signs of failure. I gathered my tools. By 8 o'clock I had showered, dressed in my gray wool slacks and navy sweater, and packed a small suitcase. Not the big roller I use for vacations with Daniel. This one was carry-on size, enough for a few days away if things went badly. A change of clothes. My medication. The notebook with my list from the night before. The birth certificate, marriage certificate, and the original trust documents Daniel had left me. Those went into a slim folder I slipped into my handbag, the same worn leather one Cora had called outdated. Before leaving, I walked through the house slowly, checking windows, doors, and the office that had been violated. I took photographs on my phone. The cracked safe, the pulled drawers, the document on the desk. Every angle, every detail. I did not touch the forged papers. I wanted their fingerprints, their carelessness, their confidence that I would never fight back. Then I locked the front door behind me and drove to the bank. At the branch, the teller greeted me by name. I asked to access my safe deposit box and to speak with the branch manager in a private room. Old habits, clear, direct requests. The manager, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and quick intelligence, led me to her office. I need to move certain documents and confirm recent activity, I told her. Quietly, if possible. She pulled up my accounts. There it was, the trust Daniel had created, sitting like bedrock beneath my finances. There were also notations, recent inquiries, small transfers I did not recognize. I did not authorize those, I said plainly. Flag them. And I want to add a fraud alert to my profile. No changes to my accounts or trust without my physical presence and 2 forms of identification. She studied me for a moment, then nodded. Understood, Mrs. Grayson. From the bank, I drove to the office of an old friend. Henry Lawson, retired but not idle. An attorney I had met years ago when the city tried to cut corners on a bridge project. Henry had a way of looking over his glasses that made dishonest people nervous. He listened without interrupting as I laid out the situation. The missing keys, the open door, the rumors about my memory, the forged documents, the speakerphone confession. When I finished, he folded his hands over his legal pad. They're building a competency case to seize control, he said. You were right not to confront them alone. We'll need documentation, witnesses, and time-stamped proof that you are very much aware of what's happening. So what do we do? I asked. We get ahead of them. Over the next 2 hours, Henry and I took apart Cora's plan with the precision of engineers dismantling a faulty support beam. We reinstated the strongest protections Daniel had built into the trust and added a clause. Any attempt to transfer or encumber my estate based on false claims of incompetence would trigger immediate legal action and criminal investigation. We contacted a physician Henry trusted and scheduled a full cognitive evaluation for me that very afternoon, complete with recorded results. Then came the part that made my stomach tighten. You're going to let them think it's working, Henry said. Just enough. Not enough to be dangerous, but enough for her to lower her guard. You want me to play along. I want you to survive this with proof. So I agreed. At home, I moved certain personal documents out of my desk and into a new safe deposit box at the bank. I wrote the location and details on a single index card and placed it under the candle on my nightstand. A quiet reminder to myself. And then I began to practice. A slight pause before placing my keys down. A moment of forgetting a word in conversation. A gentle, believable slowness. Not incompetence. Strategy. That evening, I tested the role Henry had given me. Nate stopped by with takeout. I let my eyes linger on the bags, then said, "Oh, I forgot you were coming." The lie felt stiff, but I kept my tone light. He smiled. "It's okay, Mom. I just wanted to check on you." I let a small crease appear between my brows. "Have you seen my keys? I keep misplacing them lately." I added a soft laugh, the kind that apologizes for existing. In his face, I saw it land. Pity and quiet agreement with the version of me Cora had described. He nodded, as if another box had been checked. I moved a little slower, let a few pauses hang, not dramatic, just noticeable. From the outside, I was beginning to look uncertain. Inside, I was taking notes. It was 1 week after the forged documents appeared in my office when the final act of their plan unfolded. By then, I had settled into my role with quiet precision. A misplaced word here, a soft frown there, the kind of small lapses that would reassure Cora she was winning. Each performance was measured, never sloppy. Engineers do not build illusions carelessly. That morning, the sky was clear, the kind of Colorado cold that feels sharp enough to carve into bone. I woke earlier than usual, my mind already steady with the day's purpose. Hidden cameras, installed by Henry's recommended technician, sat tucked in corners no one would notice, above the bookshelf behind a plant near the hallway light fixture. They waited like witnesses resting in silence. Just after 9, a sleek black SUV pulled into my driveway. Then another. Cora stepped out first, wearing a beige coat and a smile so polished it looked carved. Behind her came a realtor I'd never seen, 2 appraisers with clipboards, and a pair of movers carrying empty bins as if my belongings were already theirs to collect. I watched from the front window for 3 slow breaths before opening the door. "Oh, Martha," Cora said brightly, as though finding me home was an inconvenience. "You weren't supposed to be here. They told me you'd already been admitted." Her tone was light, but I saw her eyes flicker, just for a heartbeat. Surprise. Annoyance. Calculation. "Admitted," I echoed, letting a small confusion soften my voice. "To where?" She stepped closer, voice hushed with rehearsed pity. "To the care facility, sweetheart. We discussed this." Behind her, the realtor cleared her throat. "Mrs. Hale, do we have access to the property?" "Yes," Cora said, waving a manicured hand. "As of today, I have full authority. We're preparing it for transition." Transition. A word used for real estate, not human beings. I leaned slightly on the doorframe, letting my breath tremble just enough. "I don't understand." "You don't need to," she replied softly. "Everything is being handled." What she did not know, what no one in that driveway knew, was that the cameras inside had already captured her words, and that Henry and a sheriff's deputy were parked just 2 blocks away, waiting for my signal. Cora turned back to the group. "The trust is transferring today. We'll start with an inventory." That was her mistake. Overconfidence has undone stronger structures. The movers stepped forward. One of them reached for my door. Before he could touch it, I said very quietly, "No one is entering my home." Cora laughed, a light, condescending sound. "Martha, please. You're not in any condition to make legal decisions. We followed every step. I have the documents here." She pulled a folder from her bag, the same shade of navy as the forged papers in my office. She opened it and held out the page bearing my fake signature. "Here," she said. "You signed this yourself." I let my gaze drift over it, slow and unfocused, as though I were trying to recall something just out of reach. Did I? That hesitation, intentional, brief, convincing, made her smile. She believed she was seconds from victory, which meant it was time. I stepped aside, not to let her in, but to reveal the uniformed officer walking up the path behind her. Cora turned, confusion slicing through her expression. "Can I help you?" The sheriff nodded at me first, then addressed her. "We received evidence this morning regarding suspected fraud and exploitation. We're here to review claims made about Mrs. Grayson's condition and estate." "Evidence?" she echoed, color draining from her cheeks. "What evidence?" I didn't speak. I didn't need to. One of the deputies carried a tablet displaying footage from inside my home. Cora practicing my signature at my desk. Her rifling through my safe. Her telling the realtor 2 days earlier that I was already in memory care. Her discussing the $1 million inheritance on a phone call with someone who was certainly not a doctor. The appraisers froze. The realtor stepped back. Even the movers lowered their bins as if realizing they'd stumbled into the wrong house on the wrong day. Then Nate's car pulled into the driveway. He climbed out slowly, confusion on his face as he took in the scene. The officers, the cameras, the open folder in Cora's hands. He walked toward us, his breath forming thin clouds in the cold air. "Cora," he asked. "What's going on?" She reached for him. "They're overreacting. This is all a misunderstanding." The deputy lifted the tablet, replaying her own words. Tomorrow she's gone. The $1 million is ours. Nate, just don't break. Nate stopped walking. I watched his shoulders fall, his jaw tighten, his face collapse into something wounded and shocked. He looked at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. Martha never signed that, he said, voice thick. Tell me you didn't do this. But she didn't answer. Her silence was louder than any confession. The officer stepped forward. Corinne Hale, you are under arrest for forgery, fraud, and attempted exploitation of an at-risk adult. The handcuffs clicked softly, almost polite. As they led her to the patrol car, she looked over her shoulder at me. Anger, disbelief, and fear all tangled in her eyes. She had never expected resistance. She had mistaken my quiet for weakness. But quiet is where I plan. Quiet is where I build. Quiet is where the truth waits. When the door shut behind her, the cold morning seemed to exhale. And for the first time in months, the house felt like it belonged to me again. After they drove Cora away, the house did not erupt into noise. It simply settled. The officers finished their questions, collected copies of the footage, and left me with a card and a simple promise. We'll keep you updated, Mrs. Grayson. When the last patrol car turned the corner, only Nate and I remained in the driveway. He stood near the edge of the lawn, staring at the faint tire marks on the concrete. His shoulders looked smaller, as if someone had let the air out of him. Nate, I said at last. He turned toward me and I saw it then. Shame, grief, and the realization of what he had almost allowed. His eyes were red, but not from anger. He looked like a man who had just learned his life rested on sand. Mom, he said, the word cracking. I didn't. Thought. She told me. The sentences died in his throat. I waited. Silence is sometimes kinder than easy words. She said you were slipping, he managed. That you were forgetting things. That the money would keep you safe, and we'd just be managing it for you. I didn't know she forged anything. I swear I didn't know that part. I believed him. But belief is not absolution. You heard her plan, I said quietly. You heard her talk about putting me away. And you didn't stop it. He flinched. I was scared, he whispered. The business, we were drowning. She said this would fix everything. I told myself it wasn't as bad as it sounded. I told myself you'd still be cared for. There it was, the truth behind so many betrayals. Not an evil mastermind. Just fear, denial, and a willingness to look away as long as the benefits flowed in their direction. The next weeks brought consequences. Cora was charged with forgery, fraud, attempted exploitation of an at-risk adult, and attempted grand larceny. Her smiling face disappeared from real estate flyers. Clients canceled contracts. Her brokerage issued a short statement about ethical concerns. Her license was suspended, then formally revoked while the case moved forward. Her family, people who had once complimented my potato salad, backed away quickly. I received one stiff message from her mother. We had no idea. We are so sorry for what our daughter has done. No offer of help. The legal process moved slowly. Hearings, postponements, forms. Henry attended most of them, sending updates in calm emails. Each one read like a report on a controlled demolition. One more false beam removed. One more unsafe claim taken down. But the fallout did not stop with Cora. Nate's life, built around her plans, began to fold in on itself. The house they shared, larger than they could afford, was tied up in loans and in the investigation. Legal fees piled higher than their furniture. The homestaging business they'd started together lost contracts as Cora's name appeared in local news. Partners stepped back. Accounts were frozen. Within months, the business filed for bankruptcy. One evening, Nate showed up at my door with a cardboard box in his arms. Inside were framed photos, a few shirts, a pair of work boots. His car had been repossessed that afternoon. I moved into a month-to-month rental, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. It's all I can manage. I stepped aside to let him in. He crossed the threshold slowly like a guest. In the kitchen, he set the box on the table and finally looked up. I'm so sorry, he said. For not protecting you. For believing her. For choosing comfort over courage. I studied his face. The same face that had pressed against my side when he was a boy frightened by thunderstorms. The same face that glowed when we drove over my first completed bridge. I saw the boy in the man, and the weakness that had made him vulnerable. The wish that someone else would fix what scared him. "I'm done rescuing people who choose to drown," I said softly. The words surprised even me, but once spoken they felt immovable, like a support column finally set in concrete. Nate swallowed. "Does that mean you're done with me?" "It means," I replied, "I will not destroy myself to keep you afloat. I love you. That hasn't changed. But love is not the same as bailing water from a boat you keep drilling holes in." He sat down slowly. We sat there, mother and son, at a kitchen table that had seen school projects, birthday cakes, and now the cost of almost losing everything. In the months that followed, Nate worked small jobs, sold what he could, and attended every hearing where Cora's case was discussed. He provided statements, admitted what he had known and what he had chosen not to question. The courts did not punish him as they did her, but life did. He lost his home, his savings, his marriage, and the belief that someone else could always be blamed. I did not gloat or say, "I told you so." I held my boundary like a line of steel. I would not finance his denial. I would not sign away my life so he could avoid learning how to stand on his own feet. Indeed, after the hearings, after the interviews and signatures and supervised phone calls, there was suddenly space. Not freedom at first, just space, like the quiet under a bridge when the crews finally pack up and go. For months my life had been measured in legal updates and cautious conversations. Then slowly those tapered off. The case moved into its long grinding phase. Cora stayed where she belonged, bound by conditions and consequences. Nate lived in his rented room across town, paying his own bills, learning to balance shame with effort. And I was left with my house. My time. My choice. One morning, as frost silvered the grass, I walked out to the old barn at the edge of my property. Daniel and I had once used it for storage, holiday boxes, retired tools, furniture we meant to donate someday. Dust lay over everything. Sunlight slipped through the boards in narrow beams, illuminating floating specks. The structure was sound but tired. Like me, I stood in the doorway and saw it clearly, the way I used to see a finished bridge when all we had was dirt and flags. A studio. Wide table along the window. Shelves for canvases. A small sink in the corner. A chair where I could sit and let my shoulders drop for the first time in years. I hired a local handyman to help with the heavy work. Together we cleared out the barn, patched the roof, added insulation, painted the walls a soft, forgiving white. I kept Daniel's old workbench and sanded it smooth, turning it into my painting table. Painting had never been my profession, only a quiet wish. I started simple, broad strokes of color, abstract shapes, the curve of a bridge against a pale sky, the line of a mountain range I had driven past 1,000 times. I listened to the radio, to the hum of the small heater, to my own breathing as it slowed. Every morning, I carried my coffee out to the porch and then to the studio. The mug was the same chipped blue one I had used during long nights of calculations. Now it warmed my hands while I watched light shift across the floorboards. The house itself grew gentler. No whispered accusations. No staged chaos. No one rearranging my reality to suit their ambition. Just creaking floors, wind at the windows, the familiar rhythm of my own footsteps. Nate visited sometimes, always calling first. He stood on the porch, hat in hand, and waited for me to decide whether I would invite him in. Some days I did. Some days I did not. Boundaries are not walls. They are gates you manage yourself. When he came inside, we talked about small things, his work, the weather, a book he was reading. He no longer asked for money. I no longer offered solutions. Once quietly he said, "I'm trying to be someone you could trust with a bridge again." I only nodded. Trust, like concrete, needs time to cure. The trust Daniel left me remained intact. The clause Henry added stayed in place, a silent guard. My account sat untouched except by me. For the first time since my husband's death, I felt the full weight of my autonomy, and it rested on my shoulders without crushing them. In the evenings, I lit a candle on my nightstand. The same lavender scent. The same gentle flame. Its light flickered against the framed photo of my first completed bridge and the newer photograph beside it. The barn-turned studio, door open, canvases stacked inside. I had not rebuilt the family I thought I wanted, but I had rebuilt something just as important. Myself. Peace did not arrive as a parade. It came in small repetitions. The click of the lock I turned for myself, the scratch of a brush on canvas, the sound of a kettle just before it boiled. Every day I walked through rooms that were mine, answerable to no one, and felt my spine lengthen a little more. I had been treated like an asset to be moved, a problem to be contained. Now I was simply a woman in her own home, choosing what to keep and what to release. I let that quiet ownership feel normal. People often underestimate older women. They think quiet means fragile, and patience means permission. They assume we will accept whatever story they place around us, as if age erases our memory, our clarity, our right to stand firmly inside our own lives. But I learned something in this fight. Silence is not surrender. It is calculation. It is the moment before the beam lifts, before the structure rises, before the truth settles into place. When Cora tried to rewrite my mind on paper, she believed she was building a case. What she did not see was that I was building one too slowly, precisely, with the steadiness that carried me through decades of engineering. She underestimated the very thing that defined my life. I know exactly how much weight a foundation can bear before it refuses to break. Now my days begin with coffee on the porch and end with paint drying in the studio. No voices undermining me. No footsteps carrying hidden intentions. Just peace shaped by my own hands. As for Nate, our conversations are cautious but honest. I let him close when he comes with truth, and I let distance stand when he arrives with old habits. That too is a kind of rebuilding. If you carry anything from my story, let it be this. You are not a burden. You are not replaceable. You are not an old house to be sold for parts. You are the architect of your own boundaries. And if someone tries to break you, let them be the ones who shatter. If this touched a nerve, you belong here. Subscribe to hear more truths where silence becomes strength.